Tournament life at 5-5. If he loses this one, he is out of the tournament. Reverse that over on Dom Harvey's side on the right of our screen, 7-3. If he's able to pick up the W in this game, he will be our second player locking up the top 8. You'll notice both players have lists in front of them because this is an open deckless tournament. How does that affect the game moving forward? The fact that you get to able to see my opponent's deck list before we play out the match?
Well, under normal circumstances, you get to sort of know exactly what type of interaction your opponent has. We mentioned before, like aggressive deck playing against sweepers, you get to know how many of those are available. When it comes to this matchup specifically, I will say these deck lists are only 2 cards apart. Dom has an extra Proph's Eidetic Memory and an extra Torch the Tower, where Connor has an extra Fiery Impulse and an extra Sleight of Hand. Those are the only 2 differences in the main deck. Now, I will say, for Connor's side of things, I think I would rather be on the extra Torch and the extra Prophs, because both of those cards are quite good in the mirror match. Torch being able to exile a Phoenix, and Proph's Eidetic Memory, especially when combined with something like Artist Talent, is a way for you to just kind of make a huge creature. You don't have to rely on the Phoenixes. You can just kind of have a random body like a Picklock Prankster or something like that, load up counters on that. And Prophs is such a huge card in this matchup.
We're going to see both players didn't like their opening hands, so going to go down to 6, keep the game nice and fair. I understand, lads. I appreciate that. Is there certain cards that they're looking for in the openers? Are there any like key ones that like I need to have a couple of cantrips early, or maybe I need to be able to have an early Picklock Prankster? Is there any sort of real key cards that they need? Because I'm guessing they don't want to see Treasure Cruisers in the opener.
Well, I mean, the games typically, it's weird. The games can either like sort of end in very quickly, where like just one player just doesn't draw enough removal spells, and the other player finds a couple of Phoenixes early. But I think for the most part, the games tend to go a little bit longer. And ideally, the card that they're looking for the most in their opening hand is that copy of Artist Talent. If you can cast that card on turn 2, as an Izzet deck, there's no ways to destroy that card, no disenchants or anything like that. So if you can resolve that card through, if your opponent doesn't have a Spell Pierce or anything, then that is a huge way to gain a bit of advantage, because you can just churn through your deck, discard Phoenixes, fill the graveyard for crews. That is probably the most important card in this matchup.
I think just with Phoenix in general, like that's why this deck's so consistent and so good in this format, is it sees so many cards in the during the course of the game. You're probably going to see at least like the top 30 cards in your deck, so you can find those cards, those key bits that you need. And while you're doing that, you're still doing your game plan, which is of course getting Arc like Phoenix out of the graveyard and turning it sideways. Starting off though, Dom's going to shock in at that Steam Vents. We're going to opt. We're going to decide if we want to keep that card or not. We don't. We're just going to go to the bottom, fresh new one. And he's going to untap for his turn. That was a Steam Vents off the top.
So and here's the talent. Does Connor have the Pierce?
Boom. He does. Exactly what he needs. How many Pierces in the main? Is it 2?
They both have 2 copies of Spell Pierce. Now the question is, does Connor have his own talent? I don't think I saw one in hand.
No, I don't think it is. I think we're going to go sleight of hand. Look at the top 2. Put 1 into a hand, 1 into the bottom. I think it was double land.
Which is good, because I don't think Connor had a second land in hand. So, this is kind of the exact thing we were talking about. Dom had the turn 2 talent. If Connor did have the Spell Pierce for it, now does Dom have the backup talent, or maybe even a Props? Because remember, Dom, there's the second talent. Dom has 4 talents, 2 Props. Connor has 4 talent, 1 Props. So having that extra copy of the enchantment, those cards are very important in this matchup. As we see, these players kind of just, you're going to see a lot of this in the opening turns, just cantrips. And, well, Connor does find his own talent, so.
Well, Connor found the talent off that consider end of turn. It's left it on top, drew it for the turn. Looks like it's going to resolve, because we're tapping out over on Dom's side for another op. So just sculpting the hand a little bit more. Arc like Phoenix does go to the graveyard, though. So that's, first bird to Dominic.
And I think I saw a second copy of talent in Dom's hand. So Dom can just go second talent trigger and then
second calm down, Dom.
My goodness.
So now every spell we get 2 loot effects, and we've got 2 Phoenixes in that graveyard. I think the other card I see is Into the Flood more in Dom's hand.
Yeah, both players have one copy of Flood Moss. So, I mean, I guess you could make like a bit of a tempo play here if you want to maybe bounce Connor's talent to make him spend a couple of mana on it next turn. That'll maybe tie up some of his mana. Could also save talent for like if Connor goes for a big profs, put a bunch of counters on something, and then you could bounce that with talent. Um, but yeah, Dom's not going to be able to get back the Phoenixes this turn because, the Artist Talent is at enchantment that does not count towards your 3 spells. And yeah, it looks like we
Yeah.
are going to just go for that tempo play. I think I like this from Dom.
Going to get rid of a lightning axe. That's going to go to the graveyard. And then second trigger. Spell Pierce is now in hand.
Oh, so I think Dom was thinking about discarding the Spell Pierce, but I feel like Dom has the read that Connor doesn't have land 4 in hand, and I like this, not discarding the Spell Pierce. So if Connor doesn't find land number 4, Dom might be able to just slam Spell Pierce on that Artist Talent if Connor just immediately puts it back on the stack.
Well, in response, we saw Connor with the opt. Remember, this was at Dom's turn. So that's what I mean. Like, I think if Dom was trying to find the 4th land there, if he could have played the 4th land with the Spell Pierce, because now
Okay.
Connor just gets to recast it here. And that's what we're going to see him do. Does have a little fish now, because of course, that fish is it's a key part of this matchup, getting the little chip points of damage in. Dom has shocked himself twice to this point, so we'll drop down to 15. There's the 4th land here for Connor, and just passing the turn back.
Yeah, so Dom, I believe the other card in hand was Picklock. So basically, I think Dom debated on discarding the Picklock to try and find land 4 for the Pierce. But then, if you do that and Connor has the land to pay for the Pierce on the talent, then it gets kind of awkward because now you're down more resources and you don't have the Picklock anymore. So Dom kind of choosing to, weigh his options there. Couple of options here too. I think he picked up an opt for the turn, so you could go, lead on. You could lead on Picklock, discard Pierce, and then see if you can find a land off of the talent. But without land 4 is not necessarily going to be able to get those Phoenixes back quite yet, but has a lot of looks at it with the talents at least.
I think we're kind of just in another set. We're really looking for a treasure cruise at this point. Spell Pierce is going to go to the graveyard. I think that was consider found. Opt is going to go to the graveyard. Bit more loot. Again, we're really trying to find a treasure cruise, and he finds one. That's the first card getting snapped off, going to the hand. More than enough cards in that graveyard. So if we're able to go treasure cruise here, it resolves, and we can find a land plus a spell that costs 1. We will be able to get those Arclight Phoenixes out of the graveyard and start getting the beatdown plan turned on.
Yeah, and presumably, I mean, Dom's going to look at what 5 cards between the cruise and the cruise and the 2 talents if he so chooses. So Dom gets to look at a lot of cards here. And what's important is that even if there is a Phoenix drawn off of the cruise and Dom has another spell to play after that, then Dom can discard the Phoenix that he finds off the cruise to then get those also onto the battlefield. Connor considering here that maybe to try and find a Spell Pierce to see if we can fight over this cruise.
One left in the deck in the main. It's going to go digging for it. Doesn't find it. Did find a Arclight Phoenix. It then gets discarded. So now he's got at least one of those in the graveyard. Here's the 1-mana spell that Dom needed. Third one for the turn. So we will see Arclight Phoenixes come back out of that graveyard and potentially be getting turned sideways. Dom's still filling up this graveyard. Man, look at that. We're just turning and burning on both sides here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is what turn 5 of the game because Dom did miss a land drop, but Dom's almost gone through more than half of his library at this point with those 2 Artist Talent. You kind of just see exactly why that card makes this deck so much more explosive and efficient than it was before and consistent. Just being able to turn every single one of your cantrips or spells or anything into a rummage gives you more discard outlets for Phoenix, fuels your graveyard for Cruise, digs you deeper into your deck. It kind of just does everything this deck wants to do.
Another consider was found. I think it was an opt and a treasure cruise in hand here for Connor, as well as, did I see another Phoenix or? Oh no, yeah, I did see the Phoenix because it's in the graveyard. We've already got rid of that from the consider end of turn. So here comes treasure cruise while Dom is tapped out. 1-mana draw free. Is that good in Pioneer?
I mean, I would say it's pretty good.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. First, we're going to get our little loot effect. We're going to discard a card, draw a card, or rumble, isn't it? Rummage? Rummage is the right one. Right word of saying it.
And also, do remember, Connor does have 2 profs in his deck. So this is what spell number 1. If there's a profs in hand, you could go profs, discard off of the talent. Then if Connor can find an untapped land, you could go spell, spell, get back 2, 3 Phoenixes, plus
Third
all of the
Phoenix.
draws. Because remember, the props counts all of the.
Fourth Phoenix
Oh my
goes
goodness.
into the graveyard.
Yeah, so I think untapped land is good enough here for Connor if there's a props in hand.
Don't think we've got it. Opt is going to happen. Lightning Axe is going to go to the graveyard. Another card's turn. This is the most consilient spell we've cast this turn. I'm pretty sure we're getting 12 power back out of that graveyard.
Yeah, so it's just a question of does Connor find an untapped land here? Because I believe untapped land with props in hand is lethal. And there
There's
it
the untapped
is.
land. There's Profs. Now talk me through this line of what's happening. I know everyone's picked it up, but what does Profs do?
So, well, props makes your opponent concede the game for 2 mana, but it puts a counter on a creature at beginning of combat for each additional card you've drawn that turn. So remember, all of those artist talent triggers, that's additional cards plus the cruise. That was more than enough to assemble lethal there for Connor.
Happy days. Okay, right. We get to look at their sideboards. It's an open deck. There's tournaments there. If they get to look at them, we get to look at them in the booth. So let's start over on Dom's side. It was pretty, pretty mirror-like in the main. What about this sideboard? What do you like?
So for the sideboard of the Is It Phoenix Mirror is kind of interesting where you like excuse me, so you want the counters, the cheap counter spells to be able to fight over stuff like artist talent, prosthetic memory, and ideally cruise. But it's dispute can line up a little bit awkwardly because if your opponent just casts cruise on turn 4 with 3 mana open, maybe that's not necessarily going to counter it per se. I like Annul a lot in this matchup too because again, artist talent and prosthetic memory are such a huge part of this matchup. The other question is, do you want additional threats, right? Dom has access to Crackling Drake and Third Path Iconoclast. Both of those maybe line up a little bit poorly against the spot removal spells, but it's sort of like this mind game thing that we go back to. If you expect your opponent to board out the kill spells, maybe your additional threats get better post board. So the Ledger Shredder too, that card is fantastic in this matchup because again, both players are basically double spelling every single turn. So the Shredder, the counter spells, the Shredder, the disputes, and the annul for sure. Maybe you could consider some copies of like Iconoclast or Drake.
All right, let's have a little look at Connor's list, see if the sideboard's any different. Here we go. What'd you like?
Okay, so a lot of similar cards, but I actually kind of like a lot of what Connor's doing here. So he has an additional copy of Annul, which is good against the talents and the profs. He has a third copy of profs himself. So for those keeping track at home, post board in the 75, Dom has 1 profs, Connor has 3. So advantage to Connor in that department. Only 1 dispute, but made up for it with the second annul, and then has an additional third path iconoclast instead of the crackling Drake. Which, if you were going to bring in additional threats, I think I'd lean more towards iconoclast than Drake because it is more mana efficient. So a lot of these players are kind of sort of working with the similar cards, but I think the way that Connor has situated his main deck and sideboard, I like his positioning a lot better in the post board games.
Do you think it's it can come down to play draw dependent? Obviously, we saw Connor there on the play was able to get on the front foot, take advantage of that. Now Dom is going to be on the play. Do we sideboard? For that instance, am I going to bring in the because I got to stop what Dom was doing, turning and burning, or is it not going to be too much? We're going to get into that mid game range where really play draw isn't too dependent.
So I think where play draw really matters is when it comes to the additional threats like Third Path Iconoclast and Crackling Drake and things like that. Those cards, especially Third Path Iconoclast, get a lot better when you're on the play versus the draw and you're able to kind of get on the front foot. But other than that, I think play draw, I mean, it could matter if one player is able to get a couple of Phoenixes really, really quickly. But for the most part, I think it is not super duper relevant.
All right, well, the players are just coming to the end of shuffling, so we're going to have a little look at Dom's player profile quickly, see what he said, because I've known Dom for years. When he used to live in the UK, he used to live down my way. Me and him have battled out many and many times. This is before his Titan days, I might add. This is why, it was kind of fair back in the day. Now he'd completely destroyed me. Talk me through all this and his accomplishments and his special talent.
I'm more surprised that you said before the Titan days. I don't know. I didn't think that Dom. I thought Dom has been playing Titan his whole life. But
used to be he used to be a combo guy. Like back in there, I think the last time we played, he was trying to bring like Size of Insanity out of his graveyard and stuff like that. So
I see.
it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, so 6 main events played, best finish first. Notably for people who may not remember, Dom was the individual who took down back-to-back weekends. I believe, the only player in history to do so. Norm can fact check me on that. From Toronto, his non-NRG Magic accomplishments, quite a few here. Pro Tour LOTR top 4, quite a flex. Mana Traders
Hmm.
Invitational Champion and 3-time SCG Open winner. And yeah, that special talent pile shuffling, is that considered a talent, or is that, what are we
No,
talking about here?
that's Dom Harvey humor right there. That's what that is. Yeah, I've got a really cool story about that. His finish, obviously, at Pro Tour Lord of the Rings. But we'll save that if we do end up getting to a game 3, as both the players are off to the races. You'll notice, everybody that's just joining in, Dom is at 7-3, where Connor's at 5-5. And now normally this is like a weird pairing, a weird matchup. Like, how does this even work? Well, because there's only 24 players, Dom has probably played everybody else that's at a similar record, or they've either dropped out at this point. So it goes all the way down, and the way it works is he has been paired up against Connor, where Connor takes one more loss, is out of the tournament. 6 losses, you are gone. 8 wins, you are locked for the top 8. So 2 dynamics here. Connor fighting for survival, Dom fighting to get into that top 8. I'm just going to play a Steam Vents tapped here. Consider it in the
Yeah,
turn.
this is sort of the typical Phoenix opener. Both players just casting some cantrips. Dom maybe respecting Spell Piercer, or maybe doesn't even have the
Ooh.
artist talent. You said, "Ooh, does that mean we have a talent here from Connor?"
No, I saw Anger of the Gods in Connor's hand.
Interesting. Okay.
Does it look like we've got a couple of picklock pranksters? Here comes Thomas Orb. So we've got Crypt, sorry. Thomas Crypt, so we can exile that graveyard. And this is where me as a stupid caster is, I don't know when I'm going to fire that off. Am I meant to fire it off to stop treasure cruises, or am I meant to just be able to try and catch as many phoenixes as I possibly can?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of playing something like Tormod's Crypt. You have the kind of the option to do it whenever you want. Now, there's a weird thing where, like, say for example, your opponent has 6 cards in their graveyard with the mana untapped. They go to they're casting a cantrip. Maybe you want to respond to the cantrip with the crypt to make sure that to cut them off of cruise. But I think for the most part, these players want to ideally be, cutting their opponent off of casting that cruise, or at least making it cost a little bit more mana.
Well, here's Ledger Shredder for Dom. Spell Pierce is going to cast. So it's going to be the second spell of the turn here on Connor's. That is how it's working out, right? Second spell, Connors. Now we're
Well,
doing the consive trigger, or do we miss it? And now we've got the spell pierce.
I don't know
Oh,
if
it's Dom's turn. Sorry, it's Dom's turn. It's Dom's second spell of the turn. That's why he's doing the trigger.
well, what I don't know is if Connor casts the Free the Fae in response to the Shredder. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, okay,
It looks
okay.
like it wasn't the case.
Treasure Cruise is going to go to the graveyard, so a +1/+1 counter getting added to that Ledger Shredder. Nice alternate art just to throw us off here in the booth. Connor is going to start off his turn with a sleight of hand. Look at the top 2, put one into my hand, one to the bottom of my library. I think, again, it was double land for him. Kind of repeating game 1.
Yeah, and this is why Ledger Shredder is so good in this matchup, because again, it's just sort of like almost making it so that Connor can't play a second spell. Like, if you saw Connor's hand, he had the artist talent in hand but chose not to cast it because it would trigger the Ledger Shredder. So this is, really putting a hamper on what Connor can do. Now, I believe I saw
Second Ledger.
a Spell Pierce and an Annul in Connor's hand, I think, so maybe holding up that as well.
I definitely see the annul. And yeah, and Spell Pierce, you're correct there. We see it pulled to the front. Probably going to see this fire off after the triggers have happened here.
Yeah, so I think there's also an artist talent, which is going to be 2 connives for Dom here.
Dom bringing in the Anger of the Gods as well.
Yeah, very interesting. So I guess both players leaning towards that anger, and I wonder if that is maybe you just like maybe you don't expect your opponent to board it in, or you expect them to think that you're not going to board it in. You can catch them off guard, but it is good at cleaning up some phoenixes if they're if one player has a draw where they have a couple of phoenixes in play pretty early, and you can just kind of snipe them with an anger of the gods. That's a pretty backbreaking play.
Hear me out. It's open deck list. Both players fully aware there's phoenixes in both. They've boarded them out for other threats and then brought the Anger of the Gods in to catch their opponent's phoenixes.
I don't know about that.
All right. Well, look. All I'm saying, crazier things have happened. A null being cast here is going to stop that test. That's going to go to the graveyard. We're having a little graveyard count. 5 cards in there because Treasure Cruise is what we drew for the turn. exile the graveyard on the other side to put the 6th card in there, meaning that this Treasure Cruise is only going to cost 2 mana. First spell of the turn. 3 cards getting added to the grip.
And I'm very curious to see how many copies of Lightning Axe these players kept in because, as we see, both players featuring 4 copies of Artist Talent, they really don't have a lot of Ledger Shredders. Both players only have 1 copy of Shredder in the main. Dom has a second in the sideboard. So, if there's only 1, even 2 copies of Shredder in the 75, how many copies of Lightning Axe do you even want to keep in a situation where it doesn't really have any good targets outside of Shredder? But Dom happened to drop both Shredders, and a Lightning Axe would look really good here.
Well, look at this. Land drop missed here for Connor. This now means that Dom can double spell, starting off by playing the talents round spell pierce, which Connor does have in hand, and is now able to just go off to the races. Opt is going to be cast. Second spell for the turn, deciding how he wants to stack the triggers. It looks like Ledger Shredder, talent. So a lot of cards are about to be seen here. That's going to be land to the graveyard for the first one. How many cards has Dom got in hand? That's what I can't see just yet.
I think 3 or 4, somewhere in that range. I would guess 3.
I think it was. See, I'm looking at it and I'm like, it could just be 1 here.
Be 1. It is 1. Okay.
And then we're going to get in there with a little bit of damage. That's going to be 5 points, dropping Connor down to 11. Phoenix now drawn, which means that players did keep Arclight Phoenix in. Who would have thought?
I know, I'm shocked.
shock. Talent's coming in. Is it going to resolve?
Such a rough spot here for Connor. Like, Connor has a decent number of stuff here. Has Torch the Tower, has Phoenix, but just doesn't really have any way to remove these Shredders from the battlefield. And, this is kind of I wonder if, going back to sideboarding, I wonder if maybe Connor, if Connor did board out all 4 of his axes, maybe considering keeping in 1 or 2. Again, not sure exactly how they sideboarded, but this is, again, a spot where you really, really would like a Lightning Axe, and none of your other removal spells is going to do it against these Shredders.
That's a really good talking point. I hope that if we get to a game for you, I want to talk through about that sideboarding part with Ledger Shredder. Remind me, as we're going to see Picklock Prankster being, or the other half of Picklock Prankster being cast, which is Free the Fae. So top 4, there's a Phoenix. It looks like we're going to pick the Opt in hands though. We're going on a little adventure. Another nice NRG token there. Who made the adventure token? I can't remember.
I'm sure Normal tell us. Yeah, Normal tell us.
Norm is our producer behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen. So if you ever hear us talk about Norm, he's the mastermind behind this beautiful production that hopefully you're all enjoying right now. So if you haven't, make sure you do hit that follow button to be up to date on every time this channel goes live, because it will only be bringing you amazing MTG content across multiple different formats. Dom's now stacking those triggers yet again. Crackling Drake looks like it came in at the sideboard. That's going to go to the graveyard, though, adding another counter to that Ledger Shredder, making it extremely big. And Crypt is the other one.
Importantly here for Connor. So now, if you're in Connor's side of things, you're probably going to lose this game. But Connor has now seen both Shredders, which you kind of expect you were going to stay in, and the Crackling Drake. That is 3 premium targets for Lightning Axe. And I wonder, now that you've seen all 3 of those, you're more likely to keep in at least 1, maybe 2 Lightning Axes, because in these situations where Dom has the Shredder, it's just so hard for you to come back from.
Here's a Treasure Cruise as well. And I think, kind of like, can I just see your what you've exiled so far? Is it worth keep playing? Is it worth to try and have a little look at what's in Dom's deck, just for to kind of understand how he's sideboarded to make it even better when we go into game number 3?
Absolutely. Yes, that is exactly, I think at this point, these players just want a lot of information. I'm not trying to say that the game is 100% over, but it's going to be very, very tough for Connor to come back from this. And I think Connor is just trying to see more stuff out of Dom, to see exactly how he sideboarded. And like I said, that discarded Crackling Drake may not seem like a big thing, but that is a lot of information to be gained.
Yeah, it's a way to justify bringing in those Lightning Axes, as you said. Here comes a Torch that's going to go aim at the Phoenix to potentially maybe buy us another turn or 2. We're going to discard an Arclight Phoenix ourselves. Speaking of information, it's Raja's token that is the on the adventure one that we've got.
Well, there you go.
And that's enough for Connor to scoop it up. Dom going to take down game number 2, which will take us to a game number 3 here for both of these two players. We've got Connor, of course, playing for his life in this tournament. Well, we've got Dom on the other side playing to be our second player, locking themselves up into today's top 8, which is kind of a special format of how it goes through. We're not going to talk about that. The casters later on are going to inform all you beautiful people of it. But if you're a fan of Standard, Pioneer, and Modern, I'm going to go on a limb and say you're probably going to see one of those formats at least in the top 8. But here, this is the Pioneer round, number 11. Number 12 will be Modern. So we've seen what the deck lists are. Maybe there's a bit of change in it. In fact, let's have a look at the deck list. Let's just have a little look what it'll be like now. Now we've got a bit more information over on Connor's side with those lightning axes that you said. So now the information that you've got from that game number 2, how would you kind of mix it up then? And especially, of course, remember, we're on the play in this one.
Right, it's tough. I mean, Ledger Shredder certainly looks a lot better on the play, and Dom, unfortunately for Connor, Dom only has 2 copies of Shredder in the 75 and just had them both in the first couple of turns. But even, just still now that you've also seen the Crackling Drake out of Dom, 3, like I said, premium targets for those axes, I think you want at least one to find, but maybe even a second copy, because if you look at the kill spells, I mean, I guess you can keep in Fiery Impulse, because on the play you can put 2 cards in the graveyard before you give your opponent the opportunity to trigger Connive. But Axe also being able to kill the Drakes, I think Connor may want to reach towards a couple of those.
So yeah, that reminds me of what I was going to ask you. So Ledger Shredder with his open deck list tournament, I know that Dom has only got 2. Dom happened to draw both of them. Obviously, I've probably not got my lightning axes in the deck, or if I do a very small number of them. Are you scared? Is this like a trap to get into? Like, my opponent had the 2 copies, sure. What's the chance that they have the second 2? But am I now going to change my sideboarding up, ideally diluting or making my game plan worse because I'm now scared of Ledger Shredder? Or is it just one of those ones as a player you've got to accept that they just had both copies and were able to kind of snowball away with it?
Well, the nice thing about that is, because you're playing 4 copies of Artist Talent, if you happen to draw, like, let's say you board in a Lightning Axe, assuming that you want it as insurance against your opponent's turn 2 Shredder, if you happen to draw an Axe later and you don't have a target for it, you can just loot it away with the Artist Talent. So I think that because of the presence of Artist Talent, it makes it more likely that you want to have those situational cards, or if you feel less bad about having those situational cards in your deck post board.
Okay, looks like we're coming to the end of the sideboarding here. Players shuffling up. So I'm going to quickly tell you my Dom Harvey story, because I think someone in chat asked. For that Pro Tour, Dom was basically locked for 9th place with a win in the final round of that Pro Tour. And look, he knows I'm going to tell this story, so he's going to buy me a bit of time. The way that tiebreakers and everything was working, he was locked for 9th place at that Pro Tour. The only way he could make 8th is if he wins his match and the 4th feature match at Pro Tour of the Rings somehow ended in a draw where both players were playing for a winning in. So the way it all kind of filtered down and worked out is that final table, both players went to time. I think it was like an ensnaring bridge was involved, and
Yep,
cons.
I
And
remember that.
some crazy shenanigans that took a long, long time. And the way I think I was at that table, players were talking about conceding, but because there was a language barrier, the time took a little bit too long for it to happen, and the judges needed a result there and then, and it ended up being a draw. So immediately from that, I of course walk across to Dom, who's surrounded by a bunch of his friends. His game is over. He is not aware that this game just went to a draw. And I went over to him and I gave him like a fist bump and said, "Congratulations." And he looked at me with the most weirdest look, like, why? Why are you giving me a fist bump for 9th place? This is like, is where it's really nice. It's actually really bad. But I was like, no, they just ended an idea. I think you've just snuck in 8th place. And then I just, kind of walked away as he got mobbed by all of his friends because, and again, everyone thought he came 9th place. And it was just a really nice moment for, a player that I've known for so long to weirdly be the person to tell them that they managed to make their first Pro Tour top 8, which is, of course, a dream for all competitive players in Magic the Gathering. So that's my story. You either liked it or you didn't, chat, but I'm going to take that one to the grave. I really, really do like it. But here, game number 3. Dom is playing for yet another top 8. Just needs that one win. Connor, fighting for survival, needs to stay alive, needs this W right now. And of course, Dom, in these early turns, we're just setting up on both player sides.
Yeah, Dom had the option to go for Artist Talent. I did see a copy of that in his hand, choosing not to play that, maybe holding up a counter spell. And ooh, that's a rough
2-mana
one for Connor.
Milfour.
Swing and a miss. I mean, he had a Phoenix, so it's not
Yeah.
that bad.
The awkward bit would be now is if he misses his land drop.
Mill
That'd really
3
be.
lands pass.
And he's. I don't know if he's picking it up to actually cast it there. No, he's just going to put it back on an adventure.
Just taking a look at it. Taking a look at the beautiful artwork. There is a land.
Does have the land. Here it is. Here comes Spell Pierce. And yep, got the answer. It's going to go straight to the graveyard.
So, and I wonder if Dom was thinking about not playing his talent, because now he can actually go talent with Pierce up. And there's the annul. Does Dom have a second Pierce?
Pierce.
He does!
Boom. That shows how much emphasis both players put on that card and how important it is in this matchup. Dom Harvey now assembling 1-0 in this game number 3.
Yeah, that's a backbreaking turn right there. Dom, heads up play, not playing the talent into Connor's open mana. Really, really patient, especially having double spell pierce, able to just pierce Connor's next turn, land 3, artist talent, pierce your pierce. And I mean, we're this resolved artist talent. You've seen what it's been able to do the first couple of games. Now, I mean, Connor able to resolve his cruise, which is nice.
This is the third spell, right? So we can get a Phoenix back. Oh no, second spell.
Second spell, but I did see a consider. So
I also see. I think I see into the flood more. So we could use that to bounce the talents back and kind of time walk a little bit. Dom on the other side. Gonna shock it in our Steam vents.
Connor definitely not out. Going for Free the Fae, finding a second Phoenix, maybe?
No, but does find a Mystical Dispute. They're a lot worse once your opponent knows about them. Just getting in there for 3 points of damage, pass the turn back to Tom.
Yeah, and notably Connor milling a copy of Profs there as well, which is certainly one of the cards that he, maybe not at this point would want, but I guess with the Phoenix in play, that would be pretty nice. So that is one less that Dom has to worry about those.
From the favor on Dom's side, the first card we're going to get rid of is an Arclight Phoenix into the graveyard. And you'll notice like we players watching or people watching at home with Arclight Phoenixes, we don't tend to kill them too often. Once they're like on the battlefield, we kind of leave them there because other than that, there's not a good way for us to get them, exiled. That's why we have to bring things like these Anger of the Gods in out of the sideboard.
Well, remember, so Dom has 2 torches, Connor has 1. So that is something, presumably those were kept in. I think I remember seeing a torch towards the end of the game in Connor's hand, at least for game 2. So not sure if they were in here.
There's a crypt here for Dom. That's a good way of stopping Phoenixes from coming back.
Yeah, and that is a non-creature spell that will trigger talent. So if Dom can find a second Phoenix, I think Dom is just looking for a land here because there was a cruise.
Crackling Drake's in hand. Cruise is in hand. Mystical Dispute is in hand, and that Spell Pierce. So yeah, really looking for a fourth. Connor helping him out here, and this is a good thing, right? Like, at the end of the day, yes, there's a lot on the line. $35,000. Yes, there's an invite to every to next year's Invitational. Yes, there is a Pro Tour invite on the line, but yet both players still able to enjoy it and have a bunch of fun here on camera. But Connor here at home.
Connor taking the top card of Dom's deck, and Connor was the one who slope yielded for a land. You'll love to see that. That was a beautiful sequence there.
So I got nothing for you. I am fully F6. I am tapped out here. I do see another Phoenix in hand here for Connor.
That's free information though. Now he knows what kind. Now he knows one card.
That is probably the best flex we are going to see today for Dom's. Like, you can have some free information here.
Yeah, because if it's a land, you're dead.
Yeah. All right, how can Connor respond here?
So huge turn. Now that Dom is tapped out, Connor has the ability, if he has something like a Profs, could really set up a big turn. I think I saw a talent as well and a Phoenix. So if he goes talent, play a couple of spells, get a second Phoenix back, this is the turn where Connor wants to try and pop off.
Are we meant to use that into the flood now, though, to pop the crypt? But then we don't really get much. We don't get anything from it, but that crypt's really going to put, the brakes on to this turn for Connor.
It's tough. I guess what you could do is you could go Flood Mob, bounce the crypt, then play the talent, then play cantrip, discard Phoenix, and just hope to peel a land. But it looks like we are going. I wonder if this is now going after the talent instead then.
Looks like it is. Fish token given to Dominic. Gets a nice little 1-1. And draw for the turn. Dom is missing land drops, though. Big grip of cards. How does he want to kind of navigate this turn going forward? It's in the tank. Probably one of the best players in the tank, though. Do you ever think that like every time you watch Dom, he will spend minutes in the tank, then all of a sudden it will be the quickest play you've ever seen. He's thought about it all and he will just play it out. He's not going to tank about it a lot and then play the turn out quite long. He's very, will think about it, do it, done, move on with the rest of his day.
Yeah. Well, the play he decides to come up with is one made a draw 3, which I think we talked about this earlier. We say that's pretty good, right?
I think it's all right.
And heads up play here for Dom. Connor representing Mystical Dispute, so decides to actually go for the cruise before playing the talent. It's also possible he doesn't even want to deploy the talent this turn. Has maybe other ways to get a Phoenix into the graveyard. So yeah, just interesting sequencing here for Dom. And curious to see if he is even going to deploy the talent this turn. Maybe we're just going to play some cantrips and just try to find, get a Phoenix into play that way. But very, really interesting to see the way that this game played out based on Dom just kind of having the perfect sequence early with, the counter your talent, untap, play my talent, counter your counter. And very, very, we'll see it. Let's see how this game plays out.
Yeah, Torch stays in. Torch target Phoenix, kills Phoenix, exiles Phoenix, is the third card. So Phoenix goes back out of the graveyard for Dom. He's going to turn it sideways. That's 4 more points of damage done to Connor's face. Can have a little look at the graveyard.
Yeah, now we kind of see the opposite here. Now Connor's the one that gets to untap with an artist talent, and we'll have to see if there's anything like the Prof's Eidetic Memory to potentially be able to like get a really big attack this turn. Although without a creature already in play, the way that Profs works with Phoenixes in the graveyard is you need to have the creature in play when you go to the combat phase. So you can't actually Profs onto the creature that comes back. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Dom being disciplined here, not cracking that crypt to stop anything like a treasure cruise. Is I imagine I'm getting the read that he's waiting for Phoenixes to be in there to gain a little bit more advantage. Here comes Consider. That's going to be Steam Vents to the graveyard, filling up a little bit more. Unknown card to hand. Is that a talents on a braid? There's a talents, and we don't even want it. It's going to go to the graveyard from this art. What are we digging for then? What are we trying to find?
Honestly, probably just cruise, because you'll notice that each time Connor casts one of these cantrips, he's like looking at Dom, giving a little bit of the head nod to see if Dom wants to pop the crypt. He's trying to bait Dom into popping the crypt because he has a Phoenix in hand. Because if Dom does pop the crypt to stop something like a cruise, then Connor can just go cantrip, discard Phoenix, get it back. So, very, very, like you mentioned, very patient here from Dom, really wanting to, knowing the battle that he's trying to fight, just trying to make sure he saves that crypt for the cruise. And it's a weird spot here for Connor. You saw him like kind of agonize over what to discard. If he discards the Phoenix and then if he says discard Phoenix, Dom will almost certainly pop the crypt in response to the cantrip. So then even if he finds cruise off the cantrip, he won't be able to cast it. So as long as he kind of keeps up this gambit of not putting the Phoenix in the graveyard, he still potentially has outs to find the cruise. But he just says, no, you know what? Phoenix down. So Dom not popping the crypt here. That's a little surprising.
There is a Mystical Dispute in hand for Dom. Maybe sitting on that in case a cruise was to come down. Because we now hit our land drop for Connor, does have a Spell Pierce as well.
Well, I think, I was going to say Connor might have a counter spell to fight over this as well. Yeah. So, very interesting to see Dom not pop the crypt there. It's almost like Dom didn't pop the crypt because he wanted Connor to cast the cruise into the dispute.
Yes, but now that's what I was getting at.
He is going to get punished by the Spell Pierce.
So here's our little cat battle. Both players out of mana and resources now. So the Treasure Cruise will resolve. I think that was a crypt of his own over on Connor's side. I imagine the words is going to combat is about to happen. And we're going to see this getting popped. Exile in that graveyard. One of them being a Phoenix. Only 2 Phoenixes left for Connor if all 4 are still in the deck.
It's also possible that Dom felt like he wanted to get a second Phoenix out of the crypt and, weighed the risk of potentially letting Connor cruise with a counterspell back up because he really wanted to get a second Phoenix out of that. But Connor found his own crypt.
See that there? Dom picked up the Exile Zone and was looking at how many counter spells were left in there. So maybe we've got something he really wants to resolve moving forward here. There's a crypt in, but the thing is, so Connor's in. If we play the crypt this turn, sure that resolves. The graveyard at the minute is big enough for a cheap treasure cruise, but realistically, you want to get that Phoenix in the graveyard first before you pop it.
Yeah, and I wonder if Connor. It almost seems like, yeah. So we're gonna go take a look and see what's exiled. You'll notice that Dom no Phoenixes in exile or in the graveyard, where Connor has 2 downs. But yeah, Connor looks like he is valuing fighting over Cruise, which does make sense. And but again, Dom with the battlefield, right? Connor at 11. Dom's got 4 power in play. That's a 3-turn clock. And Dom found a shredder. That's big. And a Profs, Will. My goodness. Big turn for Dom.
So this means that we're going to get 2 counters on a creature this turn?
That's right? Correct. Yep.
So we can grow this Phoenix up to a 5/4 if it needs to be. We can turn this fish into a 3/3. Or we could even make this Ledger Shredder bigger if we would like.
Well, and what you mentioned there, a very good point, because getting the Phoenix to 4 toughness means that even Torch with Bargain cannot kill it. So that 4th point of toughness on Phoenix matters a ton.
So Connor was really going to hope he's bringing in those lightning axes back in to be able to get it off the battlefield. This is a really well masterful game for both players. I think where Dom had the early start and the early lead, so to speak, of getting cards in the graveyard with the talents, and then Connor was able to answer that player's own talents. He's kind of like doing the phase that Dom was doing before. Now Dom's been able to switch gears onto the offense here, being able to potentially do a bunch of damage. And I think if you look at the life totals now, dropping Connor down to 5.
Right. Remember, I said 3-turn clock. Well, that Profs makes it a 2-turn clock because there's 6 points coming in here. It doesn't really matter where the counters go. Presumably, the 6 is going to come in unless he decides to put the counters on the Shredder, which I think wouldn't make a ton of sense because the only thing you're playing around there is Axe. But Axe, the Shredder would still be 5 toughness, so it would still die to Axe, unless you don't want the Shredder to die to Torch plus Bargain. So maybe that's what Dom's thinking about.
Is he setting up potentially like just to have lethal over 2 turns no matter what, but really saying like this Ledger Shredder, even though I'm missing out 2 points of damage right now, this is the key card. This card is going to get me across the line. You've got the least amount of answers to it, especially as we've already seen there Into the Floodmoor has already been used. And let me just double check over on Connor's side how many of those he's got. Just the 1 copy, and Dom knows that.
Floodmaw, yep. Yeah, both players only having access to 1 Floodmaw.
And the Otawara is now in the lands as well, so know that that's not an option.
The Borrower could have come in off the sideboard, right? So let's look at Borrower. So Dom has 1 Borrower, and Connor also has 1. Okay. Oh, Connor has 1 Borrower in the... Oh, they both have 1 in the main and the board. Okay, so they both have potentially 2 after sideboard. Something to keep in mind as well.
Maybe we could go find it with a, Into the Fae. But then does that do it? It just resets, right? Don't just go, great, I'm just going to play it again and give you the same headache the turn after.
Right. And also bouncing it is kind of awkward because that guarantees, or that gives Dom 1 spell. So Dom could just go Shredder, play a spell, trigger. That's another card for Profs. So Connor deploying a Profs of his own, but again, with no creature on the battlefield.
Lightning Axe.
Okay, those did come back in, or maybe they were in the whole time at least. But that axe is huge because that's going to be able. Oh, it's not going to kill the Shredder.
It's a second trigger. If Dom discards, is there a point that he can, once he's looted, and does it loot then the counter added, or is it all one motion? Like, could we respond to kill that Ledger Shredder?
So what Connor can do is Connor can play the Shredder, respond to the Connive trigger, then cast the axe because it won't trigger off the 3rd spell. So very heads up play here for Connor. So that is exactly what's going to happen. And then he's also going to get to load up the Picklock Prankster because the talent plus the Profs. So 3 counters. And then his Picklock, I believe, is going to be a 4/6, which even if Dom kept in his own lightning axes, the 4/6 would be out of range of Dom's lightning axes. So it's a very
vigilance as well, which is going to be huge.
A very complicated situation here.
So now we've got a big blocker and a big attacker here in this Picklock Prankster. Dom over on the other side, though, we know he's got a few answers to it, but
yeah. So now it's going to come down to does Dom find a Borrower if they were kept in? Presumably they were, because Borrower is good at removing large creatures out after like a big Prof's turn. So if Dom can find a Borrower.
So there's Ledger. I think we're going to see talent We are going to see Tank come down, trigger the Ledger Shredder. That's an opt. It's going to get rid of the Phoenix that we had in hand. So that's going to add a +1/+1 counter to the Ledger Shredder as well. Talents is going to resolve. 1 mana up for Dom. Still got a land drop if he chooses to use it.
And has Dom gone through the Flood Maw yet? I don't think he has.
I don't think so, no. I think it's
I know
just
Connor, we see Connor's at the very top there, but I don't think Dom has seen his Flood Maw yet. So that is available as well.
Might not even still be in. Like there's a chance that there's one of the cards he's pulled out. We've seen a lot of cards come in here for Dom Harvey on the right of our screen. It's going to have another little look, see what cards are left in the deck here. Connor's going to do the same.
This is the funny part where you just like, you go through, okay, how many removal spells have you gone through? How many counter spells have you gone through? How many bounce spells have you gone through? And you mentioned with these players having access to open deck lists, it's a lot easier to kind of figure out what their opponent could have in hand because they've seen so many cards. They know exactly how many copies of each they have potentially available to them. It's a little bit easier to formulate a game plan when you have so much information.
Here comes an opt. First trigger off the talents. We're going to get rid of this Mystical Dispute. Ops looks like we like that card, so we're going to draw it. So that's now 3 cards drawn for the turn. Treasure Cruise is going to make it 7 cards for the turn, right? No, it's not. He doesn't have enough for 6 cards in the graveyard. He needs 7 in there.
Right.
Okay, a little bit more information there for Connor. He's going to be super happy.
I wonder if... Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It looked like Dom had gone like so you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Dom likes to think through the turns a lot, go through the permutations. So maybe he just counted off a little bit, or was a little bit off on the math in terms of how many cards he would have in the graveyard for Cruz. Still in a pretty fantastic spot because remember the Shredder, or excuse me, the Picklock is currently a 4/6, so you can make the Phoenix into a 6/5. Attack with that. You could even attack with the fish too to give Connor the option to go to 1 life if the fish is blocked and not the Phoenix.
But usually, I would attack with all here, right? Oh no, you can't. Yeah,
just play the Shredder.
Yeah. We attack with both the fish as well. I like that as well. And Dom just says, "I'm going to pass the turn back." Okay,
so 13 life is maybe a little afraid of Connor potentially having a big turn, but again,
Connor's aware of that Otawara, by the way. Which is next time can just bounce the blocker that we're going to have.
Remember, if Connor can find a bounce spell here, I guess we'd need 2 bounce spells, right? Because you need to kill 2 flying blockers. But even just Connor can make a giant Ledger Shredder and have the ability to potentially just push through a ton of damage here. Yeah, there's a Cruise. This is going to be a rough turn here for Dom.
So that's 7 cards getting exiled. Loot effect. We're going to pick the first another Ledger Shredder in the graveyard. That was an Anger of the Gods.
Yeah, I was going to say I was a little surprised to see Dom not attack, but I feel like maybe he thinks that he's, basically not going to say guaranteed, but he's very likely to be able to win the game next turn as long as he gets a turn. So forcing Connor to have 2 bounce spells as opposed to 1, maybe that's what Dom was thinking last turn, part of his logic.
I see another Phoenix. I see an Anger of the Gods, a Sleight of Hand, and I think an Ops. We've got a lot more draws here over on Connor's side, but we are running out of mana. We do need mana to cast these bounce spells if we're able to find them. We can't split up the counters either. So if we're able to get multiple Phoenixes on the graveyard, splitting them up, that's not really an option here.
I think Dom might have missed a Connive too, because the Cruise was the second spell for Connor. They're doing library checks, Will. I got to look at Connor's library.
We're not at that point yet. Surely not.
It's less than 10, I'll tell you that.
Here's an opt.
It looked like it was less than 10.
This Phoenix, which we know is the 4 Phoenix because 2 are in exile. Spell Pierce.
But the library count may not matter if Connor just kills Dom this turn. Which I think is...
Lightning Axe was the card found.
Reasonably likely. So
that's not enough, right?
We need Lightning Axe and a bounce spell.
So first okay, so this is the very anime. So first Lightning Axe gets us another card deeper.
Yeah, and I think, Connor, so the interesting part about when you get to this spot in the game with Phoenix is that based on what you sideboarded, kind of exactly what you have left in your deck. So let's say Connor, for example, if he has both Borrowers in deck and only has 6 or 7 cards, he can, sort of run the odds as how likely I am to find that specific card. Because I believe a borrower would be lethal. Yeah, it would be 100% lethal. So
Yes.
maybe that's what Connor is thinking.
Or even another lightning axe at this point is lethal.
Yeah,
So,
if there was multiple axes kept in.
So that's an axe. Phoenix is going to get hit with that. Did we do our loot effect? Or have we already got it?
I don't.
He's tapping 2 mana.
What happened? What did we miss? We missing something?
We're going to play this Picklock Prankster. I think we're just going survival mode. I don't think we're digging for the win at this point.
Okay, so
7 counters on that Picklock Prankster. Return both of these Phoenixes.
It's entirely possible that. Are we thinking about what lands?
No, we
played 1 land for turn.
Yeah, we definitely only played 1. It's the
Sokensan.
I can never pronounce that card.
Yeah, so it looks to me like Connor does not have enough for lethal this turn, but he's just going to present a battlefield that Dom cannot simply fight through, or make sure he has enough large blockers to force Dom to have just a million different answers. Because he might even just leave the Phoenixes on defense. To be honest with you,
I feel like we've missed the talent trigger off the axe.
It's a May.
It is, yeah. It's a May, but like. Is there a reason you wouldn't? I guess we are getting low life
deck size.
Deck size.
That's the reason you wouldn't.
So talent's going to add 9 counters to that Picklock Prankster, the one that's now got summoning sickness. 2 Phoenixes come out of the graveyard.
Yeah,
free attack. Now we're going to move to combat.
Free attack with the Prankster because that one's got vigilance. I wonder if Connor's thinking about also attacking with Phoenixes.
Well, remember last turn, we were thinking Dom basically just, he's set up ready for lethal for next turn. Connor just literally this turn went, nope.
Yeah. Well, and so remember, going back to the point that I was saying earlier, remember, Dom had the option to attack with that 6-power Phoenix to put Connor to 1. Had Dom made that attack, Connor would have won this turn because he would have just removed the Shredder as the blocker, put the counters on the Picklock, and that would have been 13 damage. Exactly 9, 12. Yeah, it would have been 13, I guess 19 from the Phoenixes. But so had Dom made that attack, he would have lost this turn. Now, granted, he's still in a pretty rough position here. And Dom's going to take 7 damage, go to 6. But again, we're in the same spot. If Dom can find a couple of bounce spells, 7 life with that Shredder, maybe not the hardest to come up with that much damage.
We know about the Otawara, and we also know about the Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, Otawara is pricey though. I think that requires too much mana because you would need I guess you could go Otawara, Cruise in, or I guess you would lead Cruise Otawara into Floodmaw, and maybe that would do it.
Well, maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. I'm looking over at Dom's side of how do I not die? There's a 10 free vigilance creature, 10-13 vigilance creature on the other side of the battlefield, which is I guess Phoenixes can block if we can keep getting them back out of our graveyard and we're able to turn and burn and set up. But Dom definitely is going to be in the tank in this turn and trying to think what's my best line here to not only stay alive, but also turn this game around and win. Connor is only at 7.
Yeah, this is going to be another. These turns just go the swings are so crazy back and forth on these turns where both players just when you both have artist talent and prophetic memory, there's just a lot of permutations. I think I saw the Floodmine hand.
Does have the Floodmaw. So that's 1 spell.
That's 1 bounce spell. So Floodmaw Otawara Cruise might be enough. Because that's 1. The Cruise is +4, right? So that's 1.
I think this is enough because of the fish
4, 5,
token.
6, 7. I think that's enough.
I think literally that fish token is enough. Attacking with both of those Arclight Phoenixes might cost Connor this game. I don't know if it was the right math to hold one back or not. Obviously, he did the math here. So Ledger Shredder is going to go up to the 3rd power with the 2nd counter here. Otawara is going to go to the graveyard. That's a sleight of hand drawn. So now there's 3 counters. That's another Phoenix. That's another Phoenix. Don't mind if I miss on this. If I'm adding 2 more in there. Right, we need spells here. Just 1 more spell. Like Treasure Cruise. There's the hand sheet. Connor, unfortunately, picks up that second loss. But more importantly, Dom Harvey on the right of our screen advances to 8-3 and is the second person today to lock up the top 8 slot here at the NRG Invitational.
That was a lot.
That blows my head.
That was a lot to watch. Well, both just masterclass from both players. A really, really fun game to watch. There's so many decisions back and point, especially towards those last 3 or 4 turns. That just crazy, crazy game all around.
That we're gonna get Dom in the booth. We're gonna give him a little interview there because that was so back and forth. It looked like he was going to lose the turn before. Maybe Connor overextended a little bit too much with those Phoenixes, but Dom taking full advantage of it and locking up that second slot, which is, let's be honest at this point. If Dom's in the tournament, you're like, oh, cool, great. So we're only playing for 7 other slots here in this top 8. He just always finds a way, and this time it was with no green mana in sight.
I know. Yeah. Where's the amulets? Where are the lotus fields? Where I don't really see Dom play these cards very often. I don't know what to think.
It's like, oh, we call him the Titan guy. Maybe we should just call him a good Magic player at this point. He can just get it done with anything. And in the mirror, which, it was so swingy. And I think you kind of expect that in when you're playing any sort of mirror match, if your opponent just draws cards better than you. But getting to that point in the game, the late game, where we're kind of utilizing which cards we're able to use in what situations, maybe Dom was literally setting up for that. Because, we saw he had the flood in hand, which you were able to identify early that, Dom hasn't fired his off yet. Maybe he was able to find it and just turn it into a W. I can see him putting that headset on. So if Dom is ready, we're ready. Let's get down to Dominic, who's now our second player in the top 8 here at the Invitational.
Hello, gamers.
Hello, Dominic. Will and Devon in the booth. First off, congratulations. Another top 8. And I'm saying that with rolled eyes because it just seems like every single event we see you in, you're in the top 8, my friend. How's it feel?
Feels good. Yeah. I mean, these smaller exclusive tournaments, they always have like this really unique and interesting vibe. And I mean, the vibes have been great, but this versus some cavernous convention hall with 2,000 people in it, it's like night and day, but the fundamentals are still the same, right? Like just you play these high stakes matches of Magic, and the emotional swings are pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of emotional swings, we got to talk about that very, very last game there. Towards the very, very end, I mean, there was just so much going on. There's so many things to think about. You both are looking through the exiled piles, trying to figure out what you have left for bounce spells. What was going through your head towards that? Walk me through those last couple turns.
Yeah, so I basically registered Phoenix in the dark. I spent a lot of time trying to find Pioneer decks and more up my alley. Eventually decided I'm just going to play the broken Phoenix deck. And as a result, I don't have much experience in Mirror specifically, where it very often does come down to both players are going to see their entire deck, and you have to keep track of what's been played, what hasn't been played, like what combinations of 3 specific cards, if they find them in this order, is going to get it done. And it's a lot. So, I mean, you saw me make some mistakes there. Connor said he did too. Like, it's very difficult to actually map all that out properly. I figured once I found my profs that I could probably close the deal from there, especially with some of the Phoenixes gone. But then Connor found his own profs, and as he said, like if he was going to win the game, that was going to be how it began. And yeah, it was far too close for comfort, but managed to squeak it out.
I do like it when you were in the tanking for ages, and then you were like, right, pick up practice, and you just mill over. Oh, I've got 4 Phoenixes now. Cool. This is easy street now, and you're able to take the W there. So we're now going to go into next. See you in the top 8, where the formats are going to be pretty sporadic on how you see which deck you're going to play. Which deck would you prefer? And I think we all know the answer to this, to play in that top 8. But I'm going to make you say it.
I would say Amulet, maybe. It really depends, because in Modern you get these very polarized matchups, right? Where some of them feel great, and then you're playing against a faster combo deck or something, and especially if you're on the draw, which hopefully I won't be for a while in the top 8, then that feels pretty rough. Whereas I'm playing the Dominic deck in Standard. That deck, you got a puncher's chance against basically everything, right? And so it feels much less swingy in that sense. And then Phoenix as well, right? Hyper consistent deck, lots of cheap spells. Like you're going to be in with a shot no matter what it is. So I would say Modern, but with a heavy asterisk. I reserve the right to change that at any time.
Yeah, if they just happen to have 4 Blood Moons in the main, maybe I don't want to play that deck. I got you.
Yeah,
Theo,
all
right, next question.
Can I talk about this for a second? Theo put 3 Blood Moons in his sideboard just for me. And maybe other Amulet players. We all knew
I would put them in the main.
It's just for me. It's a hate crime. He even said
I put them in the main against you because also, you know, these Eldrazi decks are floating around a lot at the minute, even though I'm not entirely sure it's great against them. But yeah, I would come for you, Dom, and you only, and I want you to know that. If I was there,
I knew that already. You know, I took that for granted. But he said he would have registered like the 4 Stony Silence and some other stuff, looking at this metagame if he had the chance. I tried to tell him that, didn't listen. So if I get Blood Moon by Theo in the finals to end the tournament, then I guess it was it was
meant to be.
It was fate. Yeah.
Speaking of Theo, I know that a lot of these players have sort of talked about the player that they do not want to play against the most. Would that be your answer?
Yeah, Theo would be my answer too. I saw some of the tier lists, fantasy drafts, starting out for this tournament, even just informally chatting among the players. Yeah, I think Theo is near the top or at the top of everyone's list, and he's just a hyper consistent player, right? So no surprise to see him be the first one to make it into top 8 after leading the pack yesterday, and yeah, a final showdown maybe in store. We don't know.
Well, I'm looking forward to that if that does happen a little bit later on. So we're going to let you go have some lunch, Dom, as the players are now going to have the lunch break. So we're going to come back to the booth. Hopefully, you have a great run in that top 8, my friend. Thank you. So we are back. We are now ourselves going to have a little bit of a lunch break because this is the end of round number 11. We'll be back for the last round where we find out who is going to be locking themselves into today's top 8 with round number 12. And that round is going to be modern. So we're going to be back at, I think I just saw 1 CT, which is Central Time, I believe. I would say 1300 Central Time, but, I'll have a go at our producer in a second about that. So make sure you put that in your diaries. Everyone go to the toilet, have yourself some lunch. And then by the time we come back, we'll have some modern action for you and find out who is in the top 8 today. I'm Will, that's Devon, and we'll see you shortly.